be that hard to be able to stay in contact and to make those communications between your department and members of the United States Senate. Our adversaries, Mr. Secretary, are celebrating the departure of U.S. troops, and they most certainly are celebrating the creation of a power vacuum. Most certainly they are also prepared to take this opportunity and use it to their advantage. China has announced last week that it will send $31 million worth of aid to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. There have also been reports that they are looking at Bagram Air Base for their own use. The Russian embassy in Afghanistan has remained open, and the ambassador met with Taliban leadership after the takeover. Pakistan is considering the Taliban government as a partner to counter India, and the Iranian president openly called this an American military defeat and is considering working with the Taliban. Did the administration consider all of these foreign policy implications before such an abrupt withdrawal? And if they did, does the department have a strategy to counter our adversaries' malign influence in the region?
We certainly did. We factored everything into the decisions we made, including the impact that it might have on the neighboring countries, regional countries, and others with various interests in Afghanistan. A number of the countries that you cited have a whole series of different interests in Afghanistan, to include making sure that it is not a place for terrorism directed against them, to ensure that it is not a source of drugs flowing out into their countries, to make sure that it is not a source of potential refugees flowing out into their countries as well. So all of those things are in play, and countries are looking to take steps that they need to take to protect some of their basic interests. At the same time, we've established across more than 100 countries and in the UN through a Security Council resolution basic expectations of the Taliban-led government. And if those expectations are not met, and other countries are aiding and abetting so that the Taliban is able to not fulfill those expectations, there'll be consequences for that too.
Well, Mr. Secretary, if I could, what I'm really curious about is, do you have a strategy that you established? Did you have enough time before this withdrawal to actually establish a strategy, knowing that there would be a void in Afghanistan?
The work that we've done to bring together across dozens of countries, very active contact groups, looking as we work together across these countries with NATO, the EU, as well as the UN. We have a collective strategy on the way forward, and we're working that as we speak.
Does our country, do we have a strategy? I mean, if this has been laid out and based upon the need to move out as quickly as we did you have time to actually establish a strategy to take care of what will be this power void? And I understand that you've been there now for almost 3 hours. But simply to say that you're working on it with our other countries looks to me like we need our own strategy here, and it doesn't sound like you're in a position to share with us that strategy actually exists today.
I'm happy, Senator, to follow up with you and to share both our thinking and more of our work on that. But we have organized several dozen countries that are collectively working on and implementing a strategy. Both to
my time is getting pretty short. What I would hope is that if you would, whether it be in a classified setting or publicly, if you could share with us in the next week to 10 days what that strategy is. And if it needs to be a classified setting, I'd ask the chairman to provide us with that opportunity. But most certainly, I think it's important that we have a strategy to combat what will be a void in Afghanistan, which is a void now, and most certainly is something that we should be in a better position, I believe, than what it sounds like you're able to articulate today. Mr. Chairman, I would suspect that my time is up at this point.
Senator Mike Rounds questioning Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Senator Markey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for all of your work and all of your colleagues as well. President Biden was right to end the United States' longest war. If leaving Afghanistan was ever going to be clean and easy, one of the president's three predecessors would have done so. If we've learned anything from our 20-year war in Afghanistan, it's that it's easier to get into a war than to get out of one. However, given the amount of second-guessing and armchair quarterbacking that I've seen over the last month, I fear that we haven't learned anything. We must reimagine a national security policy that prioritizes diplomacy and stops endless, undefined military engagements before they can begin. And I want to be sure that Americans at home understand the position President Biden was placed in. President Trump's deal with the Taliban exchanged a halt in Taliban offensives against our troops for a commitment that we would leave the country by May of this year. President Trump, with the support of his national security team and many Republican members of Congress, negotiated this deal without the participation or buy-in of the Afghan government. President Biden faced a choice of having to break that deal, essentially restarting the war in Afghanistan and risk increased attacks against U.S. troops, or to get our troops home as promised. But President Trump, of course, did not leave an actual plan to evacuate all of those who should have been taken out of Afghanistan. And President Trump's vision without a plan is and was an hallucination. So that left it then ultimately to the Biden administration, which did its best in order to effectuate that agreement, which President Trump in fact made. And President Biden ultimately was right to follow through on that commitment to end our country's longest war, one that claimed so many military lives, so many tens of thousands of Afghan civilian lives, and saddled U.S. taxpayers with $2 trillion worth of debt over the last 2 decades. And the tremendous cost of war hit home in its final chapter as our armed forces and diplomats executed one of the largest airlifts in U.S. history. We owe them a debt of gratitude. Yesterday, Senator Warren and I both attended the funeral service for U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Yohani Rosario Pachado in Lawrence, Massachusetts, one of the 13 American heroes who lost her life on August 26th in that suicide bombing as she was guiding Afghan women and girls to safety at the Kabul airport's Abbey Gate. The work of Purple Heart recipient Sergeant Rosario and others during Operation Allies Refuge saved thousands of innocent lives, and we have to ensure that our own commitment to help the Afghan people endures past the takeoff of that last U.S. military transport plane 2 weeks ago. But we honor her, and we honor all of those who gave their lives and sacrificed in Afghanistan. And every member of this committee, I think, has to agree that we have to ensure that there is humanitarian aid that goes into Afghanistan to help those who are in need. We spent $300 million every single day to conduct the war in Afghanistan, roughly equivalent to what we spent this entire year in humanitarian assistance for Afghanistan. Mr. Secretary, I sent a letter with 4 of my colleagues today asking for the administration to ensure that the money previously allocated or requested for Afghan war efforts be repurposed to assist Afghans in need. Can you give your view as to what should happen with that funding now that the defunct Afghan Defense and National Security Forces are not there to receive this funding, in terms of ensuring that we avert a further humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan?
Yes, thank you, Senator. And I got your letter. We're looking at all of that. We want to make sure, in the first instance, that we are making good on our own contributions to the